everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Mission Impossible Remote Learning for Children with ADHD webinar. We're going to give folks a few moments to log in, get settled. If you'd like to let us know how you're doing and where you're listening in from in the Q&A box, that's on the right-hand side of your screen. We would love to hear from you, and in the meantime, we have some music for you. All right, I think we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Mission Impossible Remote Learning for Children with ADHD. This presentation is brought to you by the Center for ADHD Awareness, Canada, also known as CADAC. CADAC is a Canadian national charity organization dedicated to improving the lives of those with ADHD through ADHD awareness, education, and advocacy. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be sent out and available to registrants later this week. We are pleased to be offering this webinar at no cost as we respond to the needs of our community during the COVID-19 crisis. CADAC is the only national nonprofit that focuses solely on ADHD, and if you're in a position to give, we would greatly appreciate a donation of any size to support this work. The recommended donation is $10, which is the usual cost of our webinars, and you can make that gift by clicking the donate button on our website. A few housekeeping notes. All attendee lines have been muted for quality control. We recommend that you view the webinar tonight on a desktop or laptop computer, not on a mobile device, and that you or anyone else using your internet connection refrain from heavy browsing, such as streaming. You can download a PDF copy of the presentation in the Files box on the right-hand side of the screen. We have received a notification from Adobe Connect that due to unprecedented demand, they are experiencing some strain on the system, which may cause some issues. We appreciate your patience and apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. If you have technical difficulties, you can submit them into the Q&A pod on the far right-hand side of your screen, and I'll help you out with that. This is also where you can submit any questions you have during the presentation, which will be addressed towards the end. With that, I would like to introduce you to our presenters today. Lena is a registered social worker and a trained teacher. She works in a children's mental health organization and has a private practice. Her mission is to empower individuals to achieve their goals. She has a special interest in working with individuals with ADHD in a therapeutic setting In her work, Lena collaborates with parents, teachers, and administrators to support children with ADHD. Gary is an Ontario certified teacher. It brings him joy to empower students of all ages to learn and develop. He is particularly interested in supporting students with learning disabilities and ADHD and setting them up for success. Gary works with teachers to help them understand how to tailor remote learning experiences to ensure they are accessible for all. This is the second time we're doing this webinar, and we got some great feedback yesterday, so we're really excited to be sharing this information with you. Lena and Gary are incredibly passionate people, and they've got some great stuff for you today, so we are so grateful to have their time and energy during these difficult times. Take it away, Lena and Gary.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear us?
I'm sure they can, Gary.
Okay. Rhetorical question. And Wendy, can you see us? Good, good. Just wanted to make sure. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today as we deliver our second webinar on Mission Impossible, remote learning for children with ADHD. Hopefully you enjoyed the music at the start if you arrived early, and if not, there is more in store, so don't worry. We are going to begin with a poll, because our promise to you today is that we are going to engage you in conversation. We're going to let you steer parts of the conversation, and although we can't see or hear you vocally, you're going to be very involved in this presentation. So let's start off right away. We're going to load up a poll with Wendy's help. You're going to see it appear on your screen. And what we'd like to know is, are you a parent and a caregiver? Are you a student with ADHD? Are you an educator, a student support worker, or you're here to just listen? Wendy's going to put 30 seconds on the clock with our favorite music, and after that, we will take a look at the results. Good luck. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's just keep that poll up for just a moment so I can see, just by taking a quick look, that we have a pretty even split between parents and caregivers as well as educators. And we do have some folks with ADHD joining us as well as some student support workers and some people just listening. So that's great, a nice variety. We're going to try to appeal to everybody's interests as best as we can. So you can definitely take that poll away, Wendy. And we are going to continue. Thank you. So as Wendy introduced us, my name is Gary Smoliansky, and my specialty is working with educators across the province and across the country to help them understand the remote learning needs of all students. And we try to make learning as accessible as possible. And my motto is that good for some, good for all. And my partner in crime, Lena.
So my name is Lena Vishnevsky, as Wendy has introduced me, and I'm a therapist, and I work with a multitude of different challenges, mental health challenges with people. I have a very special interest working with individuals with ADHD, which started in the beginning of my career, actually, when I was working with adults with ADHD that had a hard time securing employment. And since then, I did a whole bunch of things with individuals with ADHD, and I'm really excited that we can deliver this webinar to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lena. We have our learning goals posted here. Of course, for my teacher friends, this is so familiar, and for the parents and caregivers, just to make sure that we have an end goal in mind. And as you look through these goals, I'm just going to pull out some of the key words, because you're going to find that less is more is a theme that repeats throughout this presentation. So really we're looking at three things. We're looking to really examine the unique challenges of remote learning in the context of students and children with ADHD. We're looking to use and preview an array of tools and strategies and leave you with a couple of resources that you can take away to use right after the webinar to adjust and experiment with. This is our agenda. And you can see that we have a pretty simple structure. So we are starting with some basic assumptions. Our assumption is that for those tuning in, you have a student with ADHD that you're working with, or you are a parent or a caregiver of somebody with ADHD, or you're a student with ADHD yourself. We are also assuming that you have a mobile device and you have stable internet connection, because a lot of the advice that we're going to be providing is going to be dependent on that. We are going to start with challenges, turn into tips and tricks, do a quick reflection, and then open the floor up for questions and answers. Let's start with challenges. Folks, if I can get your help one more time, we're going to put a minute on the clock. This is a short answer response. And I would love to hear what has been the most challenging part of remote learning, whether you're a teacher, a parent, a student, or someone in a different category. So Wendy's going to set that up for us, and I can't wait to see what your responses are.
Okay, so Wendy, let's just keep it up for a little bit longer, just so that everyone can see what are other people having challenges with. Because I think that sometimes just having a look and knowing that you're not alone in your struggles really helps in knowing that you're really not alone. And just from what I can see, a lot of the things that you guys are struggling with are things that we're going to talk about. So keeping focus, motivation, keeping kids connected to others, schedules, technological difficulties. So there's a lot of different things. So Wendy, you can take the poll away, and we're going to start by talking about the challenges.
Thank you.
So the first thing that we would like to talk about, and what's making remote learning so challenging, is the fact that what you're actually doing right now is not really remote learning or homeschooling, as people have said, or as people like to refer to it, because those two imply the fact that you had a choice in the matter. You had a choice in what's happening right now and in schooling your kids at home. What you're doing right now is actually called crisis schooling. And the reason why it's called crisis schooling is because it's a response to a circumstance beyond our control. It's not something that you or your children were ever meant to do. And it's not easy for you or your kids. So that's one of the reasons why it's so challenging, and everyone really does whatever works for them because we are in survival mode. Okay, so speaking of survival mode, what I have here is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So some of you may have heard of it, some may have not heard of it. So with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a pyramid where each level correlates to a different need. And in order to get to the next level, you need to meet the need below that. So for example, physiological needs refer to meeting our needs for hunger, sleep, thirst, health. So all the things that you need in order for your body to function well. If you go up here to the last need, self-actualization, it's our need to improve ourselves. It's our need to learn new things, be creative, get projects done. So it's all those things you're probably seeing a lot of your friends doing in social media, right? So if you look on social media, you're going to see, oh, I've cooked a whole bunch of new meals, or I've developed a new hobby. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, how on earth are they doing that? Well, I'm going to tell you that most of us, I can't say all of us, but most of us are over here. We're hovering between safety and physiological needs. And until we meet those needs of safety, we're not going to be able to move past that. So that means that our kids might be feeling anxious, stressed, worried, just like a lot of adults are. And if we cannot meet those needs of safety for them, if we cannot help them with their emotions during this time, they will not be able to learn. They will not be able to be motivated and focused. And it doesn't matter how hard you try. For kids, when they don't have their kids of safety met, what it might look like is defiance or lots of fighting, and all those challenging behaviors you might be seeing. You might be seeing lack of motivation. So it's all those things that make it really difficult. So another challenge is the fact that kids, and especially kids with ADHD, need to have a very clear separation between school and home. Just like for adults, you need to have a separation between home and work. But overnight, what has happened is that parents became their kids' teachers, their kitchen tables became their classrooms, and their siblings became their classmates. And all those clear boundaries are now totally blurred and gone. And in order for kids to keep being organized and to have a structure, at least in their mind, they do need to have that separation between school and home. So that's another thing that makes it so challenging. Okay, so we're going to play a short clip for you. Oh, where's that thing there? We're going to play a short clip for you about executive functioning.
Just to bring everybody up to speed in case you're not.
Executive function is the brain's air traffic controller. It intercepts a tangle of inbound thoughts and impulses and steers them towards productive outcomes. Executive function helps students stay focused, plan ahead and set goals, regulate emotions, monitor their own learning, and think flexibly and creatively.
So let's keep this video, okay, never mind. So the reason why we have executive functioning here is because a lot of times ADHD is known as an executive functioning disorder. And all those things that our executive functioning helps us do would make it so much more challenging if we don't have great executive functioning skills in order to do remote learning. So executive functioning helps us with planning ahead, meeting due dates, structuring things, organizing our feelings, having an organized workspace, having flexibility in our thinking. So having a lack of that is going to make it very challenging for individuals with ADHD to do remote learning.
And of course, the honoring of IEPs is a big piece when we're talking about students with ADHD and providing proper accommodations and modifications. The IEP that the students or your child or your own IEP is built for face-to-face. So when that IEP was put together, the basic assumption was that you are going to be in the same room while you do the work, and that remote learning was going to be a very small component of your profile, if any at all. Now what we have for the past couple of weeks is essentially a totally new environment. And this IEP that was created for face-to-face interaction is less relevant. We're not going to say that it's irrelevant. We're going to say that it's less relevant. Teachers are still obligated to honor the IEP, and parents should follow it to the best of their abilities as well. But this is where your expertise plays in. You know your child best, and you know your students best. And for folks with ADHD, you know yourself, hopefully, quite well. Certain things might be working well that aren't on the IEP, and you can add those on and request those from the teacher if you observe that they are effective. Other things that are on the IEP that are being done but don't seem to be effective should be, they can remain on the IEP, but the emphasis just needs to be moved away from them. You're not stuck with the IEP as is. It's not a static document. It's a living document. And that's why you want to be as proactive and as dynamic as possible with communicating with the team of administrators and teachers and parents and saying, I've noticed that these things are working well and these things are not working. So what changes can we make? Let's go on to the next slide. Believe it or not, there are also benefits to remote learning when you have ADHD and when you have a child with ADHD or a student with ADHD. Let's consider the traditional classroom environment. You have usually more than one student, more than a few students. You have a full class of students, and there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of stimulation by other people. And what's hard to do is sometimes it's hard to cut through that noise, and you're almost competing for the teacher's attention. Usually there's one teacher, maybe there's two. You're still competing for their attention. At home, we don't have that kind of competition in terms of having tons of people in our home. Sometimes it's even just us. And that means that there is a potential for less clutter and less noise and less of that type of distraction. So that's one of our benefits. The other benefit that I can think of is, of course, that learning is now more self-paced than it was before. So you don't have to complete your work within a class. You are able to take more time to do less content. And that kind of pacing is going to be really great for students with ADHD, especially if they are challenged with processing issues and they need a little bit more time to think things through in a thoughtful way, aside from just being impulsive and giving an answer right away. The last benefit, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in detail, is movement. And in the classroom, you usually don't have the infrastructure available to get up and move on a regular basis. And here, students can take movement breaks as often as they like. And I look forward to hearing more about that a little bit later. Let's dive right into the tips and tricks, and we're going to need your help with this next part. So it's time for another poll. We'll put 1 minute on the clock. Thank you, Wendy, for loading up the poll and the timer. And we'd like to know what tips and tricks have been successful that you've used to support. Thank you, everybody, for sharing all those great ideas. It looks like you have a lot of really original ideas. Some of the ones that really caught my eye is using audiobooks for English and using Prodigy for math, going outside, working one-on-one, and I really, really like all these ideas. Really, I wish we could take a lot of these and put them into our presentation.
Oh, wait, we already have a lot of them.
Well, we have some of them, and I think that it's really, really great to have everybody's wisdom. So just take a couple more moments to take a look at each other's ideas, and then we're going to move forward and focus on some of the things that we've prepared for you. Okay. So Wendy, you can take the poll away. Thank you.
Yeah, I often find that you can get the most knowledge from other parents and educators who are going through similar things as well, because you've done things and tested things out, and you're the experts. So the first thing we're going to talk about is tips and tricks and how to manage those feelings. So if you remember from before about Maslow's hierarchy, about needing to meet the kids' need of safety. So we're going to talk about a little bit about how to do that. One thing I would like to mention is that decades of research have shown that for kids that have been through any adverse situation, so maybe war or a really bad accident, in the end, when you look at their neurobiology and when they did MRI scans and psychologically as well and how they were coping, it was the same as if they just fell and hurt themselves or just like sprained their ankle. So the experience in the brain was not that much different than having like a very small effect. If the child had a caring, supportive caregiver that was able to provide them with unconditional love at that time. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing that you can do right now as adults, maybe a teacher or a caregiver in your child's life, is really just be there for your kids. Listen to them and just be available to your kids, right? So, which is hard, we know, during those times right now, but we'll talk a little bit about how you can be there for your kids. So here I have a little boy sitting here with all his thoughts about the things that he needs. But do you really think that kids know exactly what they need? Probably not. Some might know a few things, but most kids don't really know that they need their feelings to be validated or other similar things. So I'm not going to talk about each and every one of those because I could probably spend a whole webinar talking about this, just one slide. Yeah. But I just want to encourage you guys to reach out for supports for your child and for yourself if you need support with meeting your child's emotional needs. You can reach out to a school social worker, to their therapist if they have one, or you can always reach out to me later on after this webinar if you have any questions about it. But yeah, just really being there with their feelings and helping support them emotionally is really important. You can also ask me more questions about this slide during the Q&A. So another way of supporting their feelings is collaborating with your kids. So I know that a lot of times being with your kids at home may feel like a battlefield. It might seem like it's always you against your child. Do your homework, pick up your clothes from the floor, clean your Lego, right? It oftentimes feels like it's a fight with your kids. And that could be really hard, but it doesn't have to be this way. You can actually team up and collaborate with your children. Make your kids part of the solution and not part of the problem. So one of the things that you can do is if, for example, your problem with your kids is that they're waking up really late in the morning, and by the time they get to actually do work, it's already at 4 p.m. and the whole day is done and they have done no work at all, right? So one thing you can do is just to really team up with them. Take out a list, take out just this piece of paper. I'm just going to draw a piece of paper and not great at drawing it, so I apologize for that. And you can write down the problem. You can say, hey, Bobby, we've had, well, first you validate your child's feelings around this, and you can say something like, I know how hard it's been for you to wake up in the morning. I know how challenging and confusing this whole time has been for you. The problem is, when you wake up so late, the whole day's gone by and you have done no work. And then you fall behind in school. What can we do together to solve this problem? And let your child come up with ideas. No matter how ridiculous they are, put them down. So for example, they might come up with different ideas. You're gonna write them down, like 1, 2, 3, so on. They might say, "Oh, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna shoot myself up to the moon, and that's how I'm gonna get up." Write it down. It doesn't matter how ridiculous the idea is. The goal is that in the end, after you and your child have come up with your ideas, you're gonna find one solution or two that might work, and you're gonna circle that, and you're gonna say, "Okay, so we're gonna try that out." Your child is much more likely to try something out if the idea has come from them. If after a few days that you see that after the solution you have come up with doesn't work out, you can always revisit that and say, hey, let's talk about this again and let's see what can work. So really teaming up with your child and making them part of the solution. Another way to collaborate is collaborating with teachers. So teachers and parents, it's always so important to collaborate and to communicate your child's needs. And especially now when your teachers are not seeing kids in person potentially. Well, then we might see them on video, but not face-to-face. So Kadak actually has created a letter over here that you can access, and it will about how to support kids. I'm just hearing my 15 months old daughter downstairs at home, and she's calling mama, mama, so that distracting me a little bit. Sorry about that. So it's just a template to send to educators about what will be helpful to get resources.
And in case people are wondering, there is the presentation. I know that Wendy might have mentioned this before, but the presentation is available here under the Files section, just below the image of us. And you can download your own PDF version of the presentation with all the links, so you're able to follow along. Make sure you take advantage of that as well. We're going to start with our next poll here. So I wish we had enough time to talk about everything that we wanted to. We don't, and we know that every group that attends a webinar has different interests. So what we'd like to do is we would like you to choose the next topics that we talk about. We have a list of 5, and we're only going to have really enough time for 3, just to make sure that we are on time. If we do really well, we might cover more. But what we're looking for is to find out the 3 most interesting topics for this group. So we have a poll that's going to be pulled up, as well as a 30-second timer. And what I'll do is I'll read out the options. We'll put 30 seconds on the clock, and you can start. So we have motivation and organization and learning, strategies to increase focus, creating schedules and routines, making learning more accessible, and getting your own work done. Wendy, 30 seconds on the clock, please. And thanks, Wendy. We can take the timer away, but let's just keep the poll up for a moment. Wow.
90% of you want to learn about strategies to increase focus. Well, we'll definitely talk about that. So we'll talk about motivation, strategies to increase focus, and we'll talk about making learning more accessible. If we'll have more time later on, we'll talk about the other 2 as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, folks. Wendy, you can take it away. Thank you.
Okay, so keeping children organized, motivated, and engaged in the learning. So you might ask yourself, why is organized together with motivated and engaged? Well, the reason for that is because when kids are organized, they're more likely to be motivated to do the work. So one of the ways to motivate and to engage kids is to capitalize on their strength. So kids with ADHD, they are very creative and very innovative. They have a lot of energy. Use those strengths of theirs. When they're in a regular classroom, kids are confined to a cookie cutter approach where they're sitting in a desk and they have to be listening to the teacher, reading from a textbook, right? This is your opportunity right now to use their strength and allow them to be as creative as they want to be in creating projects. It doesn't have to be exactly the work that the teacher assigned, as long as they're learning different things. Kids with ADHD are also very visual. Actually, we were taking a walk yesterday. We saw somebody on their driveway had written some math problems. And I thought, oh, that's one very clever way of engaging different kids, right? Because that means that the child is able to move around and visually see the problems, and they're outside, which is a bonus as well.
Good. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed solving that math problem. That was fun. And then they posted the solution after a couple of days. They had an email that you would send the answer to, and then they posted the top answers. It was an open-ended question, which was very delicious. Just like focusing on interests is delicious. Learning, as Lena had mentioned before, doesn't have to be in a traditional sense sitting down and doing work, and it doesn't have to be in front of a piece of paper or in front of a screen per se. We want to leverage this opportunity that we have to really capitalize on the interests of our students. And in particular, if a student with ADHD finds something interesting, of course, the motivation and the desire to do it is a lot higher than if you're trying to force them to do something that they're not interested in. And well, you know, we can really focus on interests. We can get them to learn more about certain things, which generally also piques interest. Things like Minecraft, for example, which is more accepted now in classrooms as a tool more so than a game, and allows for creativity and building, is a great example of how we can focus on interests. So if your kid or if your student or if you are obsessed with Minecraft, and somebody notices that because, of course, they're an expert in you, then we're going to leverage it every possible way we can. So can we do math with Minecraft? Yes. Can we do science with Minecraft? Yes. Can we do history and social studies? Yes. It's just a matter of using it in a creative manner. The program in itself, you know, builds computational thinking skills, and it's very good for 21st century learning. So the next time that you are considering, how can I use my child's interests, think about their different areas of passion and how we can make connections, which is what a lot of my colleagues and I do. How can we connect learning to this method of delivery?
And I would encourage you, because parents are not educators, right? Or you might be.
Sometimes,
right? But if you're having a hard time with connecting interests to the subject area, talk to the teacher and maybe they have ideas.
Yeah, it's a great thing to add. Can you tell us a little bit about rewards?
Oh, yeah. So one of the best ways to motivate kids with ADHD is with the rewards. Now, you might say to yourself, well, I don't have a lot of money to just go and buy a Lego set every time or go to the dollar store and buy a whole bunch of things. So rewards could be experiential, or they could be monetary, like having like little trinkets here and there. But experiential small rewards could be something like petting the dog, doing some yoga, or whatever it is. Bigger rewards could be extra screen time, spending time with their parents, playing a board game, or cooking their favorite meal together. So, and then you and your child can come up with what rewards would speak to them. Again, it's about teaming up with your child, because if you come up with a reward that you think, oh, they'll have so much fun doing this and that, but your kid has no interest in that, well, that's not going to motivate them at all. A lot of people also really like using reward charts, which I like using as well. There's a lot of different ways of creating reward charts. One of the things that I caution with using reward charts is the fact that reward charts and rewards should be used to motivate your child to create a habit. Once the habit is created, you can remove the reward charts and the rewards slowly. So if you gave your child a reward after every study period that they've done, and you see that they're doing it already really great and they don't really need the reward to motivate them anymore, then once they're already they're okay with that, with not having a reward there, you can remove one reward at a time, right? So it's really to help kids create habits so that they're not reliant on their rewards all the time. There's a lot of different reward charts you can find on Pinterest or Google. You can also, I have a few reward charts. You can contact me later on as well, and I can share the reward charts that I have. But I'm sure a lot of you have experimented with a lot of reward charts. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add to Lena's point, which just came to my mind as I was listening to her talk about reward charts. It's really what we're doing is we're using an external motivation to build up internal motivation.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
once you have the internal motivation in place, which is one of the hardest things to build up, especially, well, for everybody. It's very, very challenging. You gradually remove. You never take it all away right away. And then, of course, there's collaboration and discussion of like, well, I noticed that you don't really need these things anymore. And I don't really need them. I'm fine with just how I'm doing.
Or they'll say that they do need them, but as a caregiver, you need to judge, right? And also, as if you have an older child, they can create their own rewards. Or if you're an adult that might need the rewards, like all of us do, right? I think we'll get a little reward after, maybe like get some chocolate after doing this webinar, right? Well, you don't like chocolate, but
I don't like chocolate.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. But yeah, so rewards motivate all of us.
Maybe a piece of fruit.
Maybe.
Because if I don't get my fruit, I get really stressed out. You know what I'm talking about. Those fruit lovers out there. Fruit are wonderful for regulating your stress levels. But stress is a powerful tool. It's one of the things that I usually and regularly use with my students with ADHD and with the teachers that I work with as a best practice. So you might have noticed that we've been using timers to constrain tasks and just help you focus to make those 30 seconds or 1 minute really intense, and then we give you a break. So that puts us right in the middle of this wonderful chart. So we're giving a moderate level of stress by constraining the amount of time of a task, and that provides us with peak performance. And as you can see on the top, it says rocking it, because you guys were all rocking it as you were filling out those surveys. If we have no motivation for you, so you're just sitting, just listening the whole time, no participation, and you say, meh, it's not really, I am not accountable for anything, so why would I do something? And then the flip side that you want to avoid as well is the too much work. So if we had a poll every slide and we were putting so much stress on you, your performance would drop because it's just too much. Your body is too overwhelmed. You can't handle it. So we want to apply the same principle to our kids and our students, which is you want to put a moderate amount of stress on them, so intense periods that are short and focused, in order to utilize stress and the body's natural response to get work done. So in due dates do that quite well. In addition to due dates, we also have the end goal in mind. And we'll clarify about the end goal in a little bit of time. But I just want to say that it needs to be really clear about where you're going in order to get there. So if students have no idea why they're doing this specific problem or this specific task, they might still complete it. But the learning experience isn't going to be as rich because they don't fully understand how am I going to use this in the real world, or why am I doing this? I'll give you an example. So we have, let's say we have a game that we're setting up. So it's a card game. I'm just using a regular deck of cards, and we're going to be doing multiplication. So we'll pull out cards, 2 cards at a time, and multiply those 2 numbers. And in order to do that, you need to have your math facts memorized really well in order to win the game, because the faster you can answer the question, the more points you would get. So the end goal of practicing your math facts, your multiplication facts, is in order to perform better at the game. And if you're competitive, that kind of advantage is very good for you. And of course, different cases for different people. We have also frequent check-ins. So the idea that you're going to be accountable to somebody is very, very important. And I know that my partner in crime here is going to say, well, you could have a decision made of, well, listen, Lena, I'm going to check on you every 5 minutes just to make sure you're doing your work. And then Lena might say,
well, I don't like that. Why would you be checking up on me every 5 minutes?
Right. So I want to shift my role from police officer to collaborator. And what I will say is, hey, Lena, I want to help you get your work done. How often would you like me to check in with you just to make sure you're still on track? Give me a number.
Sorry, I was just reading a question here.
So we're checking in?
Right?
On task? How much time?
So I'm going to say I'm going to come in and check on you in 10 minutes.
No, I'm checking in on you in 10 minutes.
Sorry.
See, you want to make sure they're clear
listening.
about listening and
Yes.
clear about what we're talking about. So
Very
I'm going
true.
to check in on Lena in 10 minutes. I'm going to watch the clock here, and just to make sure that she's still on task, which is to deliver this webinar to all you beautiful people. This is also going to help Lena fight procrastination. And by just getting started with a simple task, so for the next 10 minutes, Lena is going to be on task. And 10 minutes is, seemingly a short period of time, but if you can sustain the activity for a little bit of time, once you push through that 60-second or 90-second threshold, you've got enough momentum to keep going, and then I check in 10 minutes and give her a boost to keep going. This works for adults as well, so many of the teachers that I work with have some executive functioning challenges, and they say that this has really worked well for them. They need a boost at the start, and then they need a boost every so often just to refocus, because sometimes they either can't focus or they overfocus, or hyperfocus as we call it. We can go on to the next slide. We got some tips and strategies for increased focus. Funny we're talking about that. Tell us a little bit about aerobic exercise.
So, one of the best ways to increase focus is by doing some aerobic exercise in the morning. So getting that heart pumping and flowing in the morning before kids start doing any work. That really helps with increasing the focus, especially in the beginning of a work period. And having movement throughout the work periods as well, which we're going to talk about as well. So another way of increasing focus is making sure that you time the work periods at a time that your kids are at the highest peak of performance. So that's called the prime working time. Oftentimes for kids, it's when kids with ADHD, if they're taking any medications, it's when the medication is at its peak. So you want to make sure to time their work periods when they need to focus when their medication are at its peak, so that it can help them with getting things done as well, right? So for both kids and adults, you all have a biological prime working time. For example, for me, I work best in the mornings. That's when I have the highest level of focus. I think that Gary, you work best in the evenings, right? So everyone knows their prime working time, and you know your kids as well. And you can also check in with your kids and see when their prime working time might be. So one way that you can do that is that maybe every day during their focus, when they're doing work, what you can do is have them rate how focused they are at different times. right? So that would also require some self-awareness from the kids. So they're gonna rate, so maybe in the morning they'll be like at a 3, but in the afternoon they're gonna be more like an 8 or a 9. So you're gonna find that ideal time for them to do work. Environmental tips. So try to minimize distractions as much as possible. Designating study area for your child and removing visual clutter. I know a lot of families, what they've done is put Bristol boards or different things so that the child can't see any posters or anything that's around the room. It's important for your child to have their own study area. It might be the kitchen table, it might be a desk somewhere, but just a space that they know that this is where I go to every day to do work, so that they're not moving around every day to a different place, because that could be really disorganizing in their minds.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me very disoriented. Every time I have to go to a new place to start working, there's something very, very important about keeping a consistent environment. In an inconsistent existence, that's really, really important. So we're going to come back to this timer idea in a moment. So some people say, timers really stress out my kids. If I put a timer on their table or I put a clock on their table, it really freaks them out. Well, if it really freaks them out, you shouldn't be putting the clock on their table because that is not, that's going to lead to long-term chronic stress, which is going to dip the performance. What you want to do is, if looking at a clock really stresses them out or really distracts them, you can have the clock give them a warning. So every 5 minutes it's going to ding, or every 10 minutes it's going to ding. So we just use the sound. They won't know how much time they have left necessarily if, again, that's something that's distracting for them. I use 2 timers with my students and suggest them to my teachers that I work with. One of them is the tomato timer, the Pomodoro technique, which has a lot of variations on it, but the basic principle is the idea that people really can't focus on a task, like adults cannot focus on a task really for much longer than 25 minutes productively. They could focus on it for longer than 25 minutes, but it might, productivity is going to start to dip. So what this clock does is 25 minutes on task, then it's an interval clock of 5 minutes break, so that you have to take a break, so you're not doing that same thing for 5 minutes and then back to 25 minutes. And that 5 minutes, that reset will help you keep going. So that you can check out in the downloaded PDF, as well as just a good old plain egg timer. So I have here, and it really helps me. This is just a regular egg timer. Doesn't look like an egg, but it's still an egg timer. And what it does is it shows me visually how much time I have left to complete a task, and it rings when it's done. So it's not ticking away right in front of me, but it's actually pretty effective because it's every time I glance up at it, it's not stimulating, and it's keeping the time. It doesn't need to be charged. It's not a screen. So if you have just a regular egg timer at home, I find those are really, really good. And if you don't, then you have a digital one that I've provided for you here. Let's go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about Fidget Tools. So generally, I have a basket full of these in my class, and I recommend for my colleagues to have these as well. Sometimes students with ADHD benefit from fidgeting or busying their hands or their feet in order to help to focus. And that's just the reality of what is needed. So it's not something that's distracting, it's not a toy, it is a tool, but it's a tool that needs to be effective and to be used responsibly. So some simple things we can do at home are, if we have an exercise band or any elastic or any fabric, we can tie it to the bottom of a chair, and that can be for feet. So instead of tapping your feet on the ground, you can just push it forward and back on the chair. We have things like Play-Doh. So some people like to take Play-Doh and just mush it in their hands and play around with it as they're doing the work because it's stimulating various parts. That's fine. Listen, if the tool helps them get the work done, we can't judge it if it would distract us, but it helps them. You want to watch out for things like fidget spinners. They are fun and they look like a potential fidget tool, and they do help some people focus. However, if the tool is causing a distraction or taking away from focus, but they like to play with it, then that becomes a reward as opposed to a tool to help them focus. So just be aware that not all fidget tools are created equal.
One thing that yesterday one of the participants had mentioned is that they get their kid to have their hand in sunflower seeds, and that's something that stimulates their hands, and that's a fidget tool they found helpful. Another participant said something interesting in that it's not necessarily a fidget tool, but they have snacks available for the child all the time. So that's something that we thought about before, but yeah, just something to keep their brain going. And
a plate of snacks. I'd go for that right now. But I shouldn't, because that would prevent me from moving. Right? Might make me feel a little bit sick. So remember how we were talking about this before, that the sitting is not the idea. So in a classroom, options may be limited just because of resources of how students are seated. So either individual chairs at tables or chairs attached to the table. Some classes do have a budget, so they can get things like medicine balls and other various sorts of sitting contraptions. But we're sitting for a long time, and we're still finding that overwhelmingly, although our teachers are trying to pivot to a more student-centered approach and more project-based approach where students are doing more and listening a little bit less, we're still finding that they're sitting and they're sedentary for long periods of time, which makes it hard to focus if you're sitting. One of the big advantages of remote learning is that you can choose what you sit on and how long you sit for. So ideally, if a student isn't able to focus while sitting for more than 10 minutes, they shouldn't sit for more than 10 minutes, right? After that 10 minutes are done and that egg timer rings, they can get up and go for a lap around the apartment or a lap around the backyard or outside in the park, come back in and restart. They can choose what they sit on. So if they prefer to sit on the ground or if they prefer to stand while working, those are choices as well. So there's a lot more freedom of how you approach the work, and it doesn't have to be that you have the one option of sitting on a chair. You need to do what's best for your child, for your student, or for yourself.
And one other part of movement is the fact that work doesn't have to be done at home. They can do it while playing basketball, while being outside on a walk, while running, right? So it doesn't have to be where they're sitting on a desk or at a kitchen table. They can be doing different things while you ask them math questions or whatever it is. They can be taking a walk while listening to an audiobook or something, right? So it could be different. We do have this funny picture here of the grown men with bouncers because I just couldn't resist not putting it. We have, as I mentioned before, a 15-month-old daughter, and I just couldn't resist not putting this grown man in bouncers over there.
And Lena,
yes,
congratulations. It's been 10 minutes and you are still on task. You're still delivering this webinar.
Thank you. Wow.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel really good. I forgot you were going to go check on me. So
shall I check in on you again?
Sure, that's very helpful.
10 minutes?
In 10 minutes?
I think we'll put it 20. I think you're doing a pretty good job by yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right.
Appreciate that.
20 minutes. And while we wait, we might as well talk about not knowing what you're doing. Remember our short discussion about end goals previously? Well, this feeds into it quite well. So there are two types of I don't knows that can happen in a educational journey. There's the I don't know where I'm going part, which means that I have no idea of what success looks like or what you want me to do with this or how this is going to help me in my life. That's one I don't know. And we solve that one by making sure we have clear end goals. The other I don't know is I don't know how to do this. I totally understand what you're asking me for. You want me to build this elevator. I have no skills. I don't know anything about building elevators. And sometimes that is the barrier. So you could receive a piece of work from the teacher, or you could assign work to your students, or you could receive work yourself, and you can say, all right, well, clearly the goals are written. However, I don't know about the challenges and the tips and tricks. I just don't have the knowledge and the skills. So in that case, we're going to take one step back, and you want to make sure before you embark on the task, or your child or student embark on the task, you make sure that they have the skills to perform the task. And of course, the task might show that. But if they don't have the skills, it's very important that you take one step back and say, clearly this is not a realistic ask. They don't know how to do this. Or, I'd like them to be slightly more challenged, and they're able to handle it. So what you need to then do is you need to modify the task. We're not talking about accommodating needs, we're talking about modifying. So we're setting our target a little bit differently to help them set up for success, because we don't want to show them all the things they can't do. We want to help them see that they can do certain things, and if we assume they could do something but they can't, then we need to readjust the course. And if they have a realistic goal and they know what they're doing, then focusing is going to be a lot easier. Right? We're talking about all these barriers that students are trying to jump over, and we're moving one by one, ideally. So a big barrier to focus, especially with remote learning and a lot of screen time, which is, that's the reality that we're dealing with, is the fact that some of our students are so stimulated by the screen that they end up going down a rabbit hole. So they have to watch this YouTube video from Khan Academy about fractions. But after they finish watching that video, they might click on another video and another video. And hours later, they emerge from the other end of this black hole with no idea what happened to their time. So there are tools that I recommend to my students, especially now that they are spending a lot more time on the screen. And one of them is for their mobile devices, and one of them is for desktop computers that are using browsers of different sorts. So you'll see Waste No Time, which you can actually search online and it'll come up, is an application or an extension that you can plug into your browser. And I would suggest installing it across all your browsers. And what you can do is a couple of things. So Waste No Time lets you either set the websites that are or not allowed. So if there's only one website you should be using for your work, you can actually insert that in and it will lock you out of all other websites. You're stuck with that one, and in order to reset it, you actually have to shut down your computer and reboot. And yes, that's annoying. However, those 45 to 60 seconds that it takes you to shut down and reboot is enough time for the impulse to leave your head in case you're going to make a bad choice and wander where you shouldn't. Now, with Waste No Time, you can also set a time limit. So if you only are giving yourself 30 minutes to be on the internet, you can do that. You can set 30 minutes on the timer, and after 30 minutes, it locks all the browsers, which means that you have to shut down your computer and reboot if you want more internet time. And again, a lot of times we veer off course because we are following impulses. And for our friends with ADHD, those are a lot harder to control because of executive functioning. So for mobile devices, Lena, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to mention that if you wanted to click on the links over here for Waste No Time or the screen time, if you download the PDF version of it, you'll be able to click on the link.
Okay, right. And then, like I said, you can just search them. They're very common. Yeah. Like Waste No Time is a very common program. Nothing else really should come up at the top searches. For mobile devices, a lot of people have asked me if they should buy the multitude of paid applications that help you regulate screen time. And I say, work with what you got first. Work with what you got. So there are screen time features on most phones. I think all phones have screen time features. Those are very soft, though, because what they do is they'll limit screen time between certain times of the day or after using the screen for a certain amount of time. But then you can just say, just keep going, and then it'll just cancel it. So if you have good self-control, but you just need a little bit of help once in a while, screen time is okay. I would then go to parental controls, where you can actually lock people out of certain applications if there is too much use. And I would recommend that you just search and find out more about those, but these are tools that you don't need to pay for, that if you have a mobile device or a desktop computer with internet access, you have access to right now.
Okay, so we're going to skip schedules and routines for now. We might come back to just a few, we're going to come back to it possibly later on if we have some time, but we're going to go to making content accessible.
Okay.
Do you mind if I talk about this, Youre?
I don't mind at all.
Okay. So, with making content more accessible, less is more. Just like the squirrel over here, less is more. So, less words, more visuals. If you've noticed in our presentation today, we don't have a lot of words. We mainly have pictures because kids with ADHD, they're visual learners. And they're going to remember the images rather than the words. And when there's too many words, nobody can remember anything. Also, less talking, more doing. Kids with ADHD are more tactile. They want to do things, and they don't want to sit there and listen to the teacher, blah, 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 just like what we're doing right now, right?
Hey.
I know. But you want to get them to do different things. Like we're getting you to do different polls as well, right? So that's one thing you can potentially add to an IEP. Asking a teacher if he could give more tactile things for your child to do. And also for more visuals. Less time, more productivity. So that means that giving them less time to do a task in order for them to be more productive. A realistic amount of time, but yet less time. Less content is more comprehension. So the reason why we're not going to talk about potentially all 5 topics we want to talk about is yes, because it's going to take more time, but also because we're hoping you're going to leave this webinar today with at least one thing that you're going to take away, at least one thing. So when there's a lot of information thrown at you, there's no way you're going to remember all of it, right? So less content means that kids will have more comprehension. So these are some of the things you can ask teachers to do as part of accommodating IEPs. Teachers can also, and you as well as a parent, when you get instructions from teachers, you can break things up to bullet points so that it'll be easier for kids to understand the instructions, right? You can even do it as a task with your child so that this is our complicated instructions over here in a paragraph. How do we break it down in bullet points to make it a little bit easier for you to understand, right? Also having check marks for different things, right? So teachers and parents, if you can provide your child with check marks of different steps that need to be done, that's also really helpful for kids. Okay, and that also brings us here to chunking or decomposing. Gary, I'm going to let you take this one.
Thanks, Lena.
You're very welcome.
Nothing.
And wait, you haven't checked on me. It's been 20 minutes. You haven't checked on me.
Hasn't been 20 minutes. See,
it hasn't been. Oh, okay.
Perfect example of the inability of some people to feel time.
Excuse me.
You still have 8 minutes.
Okay.
So don't
well,
worry about
you're
it.
keeping time.
I am keeping time. Thank you very much. Actually, you have 1 minute, not 8 minutes. But so by the end of the slide, I will check in on you.
Perfect.
Regardless, making breakfast can be very complicated. And in the EduSpeak world, we talk about things that sound like chunking or decomposing. And really, that's just EduSpeak for taking something big and breaking it down to its essential parts. So whether that's how to make breakfast in the most basic things, or how to bake a cake. Everything is procedural. So if you follow a certain series of steps and you combine them together, you can make more complicated tasks realistic. And that's what we want to think about is what are the most elementary parts that we can break a task into, that we can chunk a task into or decompose a task into to make it easier. And if, let's say, we say, I like you to make breakfast. For somebody, that might be a very overwhelming task. Where do I start? What do I do? This is too much. But if we say, can you slice the bread? That's one simple task, and then we add on that.
Okay, so we are almost out of time for our talking. I'm just going to go quickly through here about getting your own work done. You guys, as parents and teachers, if you have your own kids, you all of a sudden got a lot more hats and a lot more job titles than you already had. You were a communication director, a children's programming guide, a personal chef, a teacher. You have so many different jobs right now. How can you get your own work done? So I saw somebody, when we asked the question about tips and tricks, I saw somebody said that they work beside their child. And I'm sure that was probably to get the child to get their work done. But that's something you can do, to work alongside your child. So while your kid is getting their work done, if they don't mind, you're going to sit there on your own laptop, if it's not distracting for either of you, to get your own work done. And this way your child is accountable to working because they know that you are also working. And I don't know about you, but I know it motivates me when I see somebody else working beside me. And that's also maybe when you give your child screen time. And with everything that's going on right now, it's okay to give kids a little bit more screen time than before. It's understandable that we are in crisis schooling mode and we are doing things to help us survive. So it's okay to be a little bit more flexible because our kids now depend on screen time for their social time, for their education, really for most things that we need. And also, if you have a partner, alternate with a partner in order for you and your partner to get your work done. I just want to mention how important it is for you guys to take care of yourselves right now. In order for you to provide for your child, it's always important to do self-care. But now, more than ever, when you're home and you're having all these job titles, make sure you do things to replenish yourself, to take care of your own body, your soul, your mind. Do things that help you. Even if you have just 5 minutes in a day. It could be mindfulness, it could be just quickly checking social media, whatever it is. But social media might not be the best idea right now because that could increase anxiety for a lot of people. So doing things for yourself is so important. Now, the last thing I want to say, we have spoken a lot about how to make things work and how to make this whole bizarre situation of remote learning work for you. But if it's not working right now, ditch it. And that's okay, because right now, the most important focus is your kid's mental health, yours and your kid's mental health. If you feel like your child cannot get past that safety need, and they're feeling worried or anxious, and they might not tell you they're feeling this way, they might not know they're feeling this way, then I would say ditch it. Just forget about it for the time being. Focus on life skills. Focus on spending time with your child. Find the positive things in the situation and do things that you don't have time to do otherwise, because it could be so exhausting if you're fighting with your kid every day to get things done. We didn't have time to talk about schedules. There's a funny little schedule over here, which some of you may have seen circulating around. I've created a sample schedule that looks, I guess, similar to this one, but hopefully it's a little more realistic. You can find it in the files section, and Wendy's going to pull it up for us. So we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about this one, but just wanted to take a look at it, and it's something that you can edit yourself as well to make it work for you. And if you can see, there is study blocks here, there's movement breaks, social time is important to put into there. Just a quick note about study blocks and the fact that it needs to be no more than an hour long. And I just want to mention for kids in elementary school, kids in elementary school with ADHD can focus for 5 to 20 minutes at a time, and middle school to high school, 15 to 45 minutes at a time. So don't expect your kid to focus for much longer than that. Okay, so that's it about schedules. And you can ask us more about it in the Q&A as well. And we can remove this schedule. And Youre, do you want to talk about a summary?
Well, in conclusion, we have just 5 things that we wanted to make sure that are fresh on your minds before we ask for your feedback and next steps. I think Lena has really done a good job at emphasizing the fact that your sanity and your children's sanity is paramount to academic success. So when they are available for learning with the fact that they're feeling safe and secure, that's when learning is going to happen. But otherwise, just show as much love as you can, as much patience as you can. This is a difficult situation for everybody. You want to try to be as effective with routines as possible. So schedules are great, but I was told, setting up a routine is important. And if things don't go exactly according to the time blocks, it's okay as long as the tasks get done. Communication really is your greatest ally. And find that time when your child is going to be at their peak performance, is going to cause the least resistance. And if you leverage their strengths and interests, you'll find that that actually brings a lot of really great results. So in our conclusion, we are going to have one last short answer response. And we're not going to put the timer here because I'm sure that you've had your fill of Mission Impossible music. We just genuinely want to know, where are you going to go from here? So using 6 words, they doesn't have to be a sentence, but using 6 words, we'd like to know, what are you taking away from our presentation that you would like to try right?
I'm also going to give people a heads up that we'll be moving into the Q&A soon. So as folks are sharing, think of any last questions you have for Lena and Gary, and go ahead and slot those into the Q&A box, and we can start working with those. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for providing your 6-word answers. It's really helpful also to see what you guys took out of this.
Yeah. I wonder if people have questions. This is the opportunity to hear from you. So if you want to put them right here below in the Q&A box, we would love to do our best to answer, and we're just here to support as best as we can.
If you guys are also interested in reading more about this topic, I wrote an article just about this topic, and you can find it on my LinkedIn as well. So you had a link to my personal information in the beginning, so you can find it through the LinkedIn if you're interested in learning more about the strategies there.
Yeah, good. And that's a good spot to get more information. Also, Kadak, of course, has a wealth of information. That's a good place to go. So we've got a great question here. Lena, how would you shorten screen time without having kids get angry?
That's a really good question. So just like we talked about with teamwork and collaboration, what I would do is I would talk to the child and see, well, first of all, how long is the screen time? Is it like, are they on the screen for the whole day? Who's it a problem for that they're on the screen? Is it getting on the way of them getting their work done, right? So I would talk to the child and say, you know what, I know it's been hard to be motivated and getting work done. And it's so easy to be drawn into the screen, but let's work together and see what's a realistic time that you can get that you can be on the screen, right? So have your child come up with ideas. They might say, oh, I want to be on the screen all day. Write it down, just like I said, or take that idea. You might say, well, what about 2 hours a day? Or an hour a day for social time and then an hour a day for games or whatnot, right? Because just like we sometimes need to melt our brains in social media and just do mindless things, now especially kids need it more than ever to do these mindless things to manage their feelings. But yeah, just teaming up with your child and figuring this out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, Lena, it's maybe a little bit challenging to establish, but the fact that devices are privilege, and it's not a given privilege to be on a device. So remember, they need to be charged and they need to be connected to the internet. Otherwise, they're not very useful. And so what we want to reestablish is, if we're having a really hard time for our students and our kids to stop with screen time, and self-control is really difficult, is okay. We have to kind of start from zero and see and build up that relationship again.
Okay, so Youre, I'm going to ask you the next question. So do you have strategies that would help motivating post-secondary students, methods of supporting them as an educator and not as a parent?
Yeah, actually it's...
Sorry.
Hi, you took the screen away from me, Lena. That's not nice. Well, I happen to be also teaching in post-secondary, so I do have a couple of college classes, and the good thing about when you're dealing with post-secondary students is that you're dealing with adults, so people who are ideally responsible for their own actions. The challenging thing is that because they're adults, they can decide that they don't care and they're not going to show up, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I find there's always a key group of students that are quite devoted and they do follow your instruction quite well. And then there is the rest who are, kind of ebb in and out. And my winning principle has been communicating. So communicate often and communicate with all the students. And whether or not you assume that they are or aren't following, the more communication, and that's posting messages or using your learning management system to interact with them, the more touch points you can have with the class in general, the more buy-in you'll get. And then the other thing you can look at is engaging teaching principles, and I would invite you to reach out to me and we can talk about some specific strategies as well.
Okay, yeah, and another way I think, I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not because we're just answering people's questions here as well. So challenging students, so like post-secondary students might be really interested in having different challenges and competitions. That's something. So that's giving them different rewards by making them feel accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any suggestions for limiting screen time when a child needs to do research for assignments? I keep blocking certain sites, then reopening them for research or accessing teacher-suggested resources.
So that becomes really cumbersome, I find, because that's where something like waste no time would be really effective. So listen, you've got 30 minutes to get whatever you can get out of the internet or this limited group of websites. So what I would do in that case with a waste no time is I'd put a 30-minute limit, and then I would only allow the specific websites that are going to be helpful. There's too much information. And let's think about it. In 30 minutes, what are they going to be realistically able to get through? Well, maybe 2 or 3 websites in a thoughtful manner, if they have information and the teacher has really done the work for you. So I would set the timer at 25 or 30 minutes, which is the focus range for students anyway. And then I would only allow those 2 or 3 websites to be available. And then see what happens, because more time doesn't mean that there is going to be more research coming out. But I hear what you're saying. You're having to manage a lot of different elements, and that could be more frustrating than helpful. So check waste no time. You would just set it up and you'd let it run. And after 25 minutes, if they've produced nothing, then there's an issue either with the research topic or with the method they're using. And then you have to pull back and have a different kind of conversation.
So somebody here has shared a resource. It's called Kelly Mental Health, Rolling with ADHD. So that's something that you guys can use as well. And there's a question here about studying with music. Is it positive in general, or which kind? So my answer to that is that research has shown that classical music increases focus. However, I know for myself, I can't focus with music. And so I think it's a very individual thing. Some kids and adults focus better when they have really loud music with words in them, and that's how they focus better. Some people focus better with TV in the background. For example, I need to have everything quiet in order to focus. So I think it's really individual, and you have to see with your child how much they're able to focus with the music. Right, and trial and errors.
Yeah, and again, it's a tool, right? So if it's helpful and you see that there are results, however, it wouldn't be something that you would use. Everybody has different needs, so try to avoid dismissing tools and strategies that don't work for you when you're dealing with other people, even if it's hard to understand. Well, how could you possibly focus with all this really loud music blaring in your ears? For some people, that's how they're wired, and they need the extra stimulation and the rhythm to keep on steady. Okay.
Let's see the times. It's 4:26.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any more questions?
You know what I think, Lena? I think it would be appropriate for us to wrap it up. So, Wendy, can you get rid of the 6-word story for us? We'll save it and tuck it away for later. And if we can go to the very last slides, that would be great. I just wanted to thank everybody. First of all, I want to thank Wendy and Kadak for helping set this whole session up and for giving us a little bit of stage time to interact with you. And of course, I want to thank Lena for helping me put this presentation together. She's been nothing but fabulous and patient with me. And of course, we want to thank you for your wisdom and for your expertise and for your incredible participation. I know this is not maybe an ideal environment to talk about these things, but we do the best we can with what we have. And I'm going to have Lena have the final word, and then Wendy have the final word.
All the way. So we really enjoyed hosting this webinar and the one that yesterday as well. So thank you so much for being here and for giving us your time. If you do have more questions and you want to reach out, my contact information is here, my email and my phone number. And I provide counseling to children and adults. And Gary does consulting to teachers and to parents with educational related things. So feel free to reach out to us for any advice that you might have. And
thank you so much, Lena and Gary, and thanks to all who are on the webinar today for tuning in and listening. We will be sending out the recording shortly, hopefully within the next few days. There will be a feedback survey attached to that. If you could fill that out, we would really appreciate it. It's good to know that we're providing helpful content. So you can leave some ideas in there about stuff you'd like to see in the future as well. It would be great if you could connect with us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find us at Center for ADHD. We have a few things coming up related to the pandemic, so we're planning a Q&A with an expert. So keep an eye out for that, and we look forward to kind of keeping this momentum going, and we hope that you got a lot out of this presentation and feel sure that you did. Thank you so much.